Hey guys, MacGyver Mike 1 here. Um, Back with another book review and comparison to a film to the Bond series. We took a look at Moonraker. How I really enjoyed this book. It was a great read, despite its twisted ending. I also wanted to show you the Penguin book cover on why I prefer those covers over. This is the Thomas and Mercer ones. Here's the cover for Moonraker by Penguin. Looks really cool. Carla Brand's on the cover, and you see Hugo look, pretty menacingly with his Moonraker rocket. Wish I had that copy of the book, but couldn't find it back then, and I still can't find it anywhere. And with this one, so that was the third book in the series. Also wrote it in Jamaica. He wrote all the Bond novels in Jamaica. I'm gonna say that and never mention the Jamaica stuff ever again. Um, the next book in the series I'm going to take a look at is the fourth book in the series, released in it was a year after Moonraker, 1956. Diamonds Are Forever. This isn't my original copy of the novel. This is my second one. My original copy was the Penguin one, but it got water damaged in a camping trip, and it was far from repair, so I threw it away, and I could never find another copy of it for years. And then right at the same time I got Moonraker, I got this copy. So because I found it used on Amazon, and it is very used. It's from the Denver Public Library. There's stickers and stamps and stuff all over it. I mean, I like these copies of the book. I like the Thomas and Mercer ones. They're really nice font sizes, if you can tell. They're very nice and they're big. But I just don't like the covers. They just look bland. I don't like that. It's very boring looking. You get a red 007 logo, black and white cover. Not as cool looking as this. So, but enough of that. Diamonds Are Forever it doesn't follow Smersh in this one, which is a completely different turn. Because Smersh was in the first three novels. The main villain in those books, Lashif or Lashifra, can't pronounce the name right, so whatever, works for Smersh. And then Mr. Big works for Smersh. And Hugo Drax works for Smersh. In this one, no Smersh. The Mafia. Freaking gangsters, which I'm like, okay, that's cool. When I first read this book, I found it very forgettable because at the time, I really wasn't into gangster stuff. I wasn't into that kind of stuff. Not my cup of tea. I wasn't a Godfather fan at the time, so just wasn't a fan of that kind of stuff. So I didn't like it at first. So I'm like, it was an okay book, and the movie was more entertaining. Oh boy, did that change when I recently reread this book. I was like, oh my god, I couldn't put it down. Now, I was really worried in revisiting this book because, Calvin Dyson, Calvin Bond fan, he wasn't too crazy about this book, and I'm like, oh boy, I'm not going to like this one at all, am I? Oh, man. But then I picked it up, and I couldn't put it down, and I find it very fun to read. I literally, the day I picked it up, I got like halfway through, and then last week I finished reading it, and actually, no, I think it was this last Monday or Sunday. I finished reading it, and I loved it. Thought it was a very fun read. So I'm going to talk about it. Takes place in the late mid-50s. Like I said, Fleming doesn't date his books, the stories. When Fleming was writing this book, okay, when he writes all of his James Bond books, when he goes into the details of the book, he looks into his background information very well. That's what I really like about these Bond books. He can get very detailed on the stuff he's talking about, the subjects. In Casino Royale, he's talking about gambling, he knows about that kind of stuff because he gambles. He was a gambler. And Live and Let Die, he looks into the whole vintage coin stuff, the Spanish coins and all that stuff. Looks into it. Moonraker looks into that type of the rocket stuff too. But with this one, he was studying about diamond smuggling and all that stuff. So, and he was also writing a nonfiction book about that stuff as well, which is really cool. I've never read it before, but I think that's kind of cool that he was, really into that, into his background material, which I think that's cool. And in this book, this heavily takes place in America, unlike the other books, which takes place in Europe. Like Live and Let Die had some parts in America, like it took place a little bit in New York City and took place in Florida. In Moonraker, and also in Jamaica, but in Moonraker took place heavily in England. So he decided, I'm going to have this take place in America, especially in Las Vegas. That's the heavy setting in this book, is Las Vegas, Nevada. Okay, so Bond is investigating some diamond smuggling and all that stuff and seeing what the hell with that's going on. At first, he's like, why am I doing this? Why do I have to do this? I don't like this job. I just want to go back home to England. I want to go back home. I don't want to do this. But he does it, for a queen and country. He goes under the pseudonym Mr. Peter Franks, like in the movie, but because they kidnap Peter Franks. He's a heavy diamond smuggler because this random villain named ABC. ABC. That's a funny name for a villain. Is smuggling diamonds out of Africa, out of South Africa, and all that stuff. So Bond, meets up with the Bond girl in this book, Tiffany Case, who is a diamond smuggler. She has a troubled past. Like a lot of some of Fleming's Bond girls in these books, they were raped and all that stuff, and they have a rough time. That's the hardest part about to read these books, because I'm like, okay, this is kind of uncomfortable to read about. So, and Tiffany Case went through that kind of stuff in her youth. It's sad. I feel bad. So she smuggles diamonds for a living. She smuggles diamonds for these mobsters in America. So she teams up with Peter Franks, and James Bond does very little with his pseudonym. So he goes like, just put me under James Bond. That'll be my name. So they decided to go smuggling diamonds out of America. So they get out of Britain and they go into New York. So they go to New York and meet up. And Bond meets up with this character named Shady Tree, who is this random hunchback person, very strange person. Is connected with the mob and all that stuff. And so they decided, to go smuggle diamonds and stuff. And Bond and Shady become friends in this one. And Shady goes like, hey, here's some money, blah 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 blah. Go to this place, go to the Saratoga horse racetrack and all that stuff, and and start betting on this horse and stuff like that, and go smuggle out my diamonds. They smuggle the diamonds in James's golf clubs and stuff. Grab his golf balls and put the diamonds in the golf balls. That's how they get the diamonds out of England and into New York. So, and they move the diamonds, and the diamonds get moved to California and then into Las Vegas, but mainly in Las Vegas. And then so after that happens, Bond is reunited with Felix Leiter. Felix Leiter comes back after not being in Moonraker. Felix is a little different in this one. He lost his trigger hand and most of his leg due to the incidents in Live and Let Die. So he has a hook and stuff, and so he retired from the CIA and started working for Pinkertons, which is a private detective company that actually still exists to this day, which I think that's really cool. That Fleming threw that in there. So he becomes a private investigator. And he's investigating the weird diamond smugglings and stuff, and supposedly Shady Tree is working for the Spangled Mob, which is the main villains of this movie. The Spangled Mob is these two brothers. This one brother lives in England, and they have like weird names. I can't pronounce the names very well. I can only pronounce their last names. One is named after an ice cream, which is very strange. And then yeah, and the other one is located in London, who is actually ABC. Um, so after all that stuff happens, Bond and Tiffany Case go out for a nice dinner and stuff, and Bond falls in love with Tiffany Case. This is the first girl he fell in love with since Vesper Lynn back in Casino Royale. That was like 2 to 3 books ago. So because he didn't really fall in love, well, he kind of was entranced by Solitaire, but Garla, she was getting proposed to another guy, so they never really got a chance to fall in love. He falls in love with Tiffany Case, but Tiffany doesn't want to have anything to do with men due to her past history with her rough childhood and stuff with guys. So initially, and then they got drunk and stuff like that. Initially, she wanted to make out with Bond, but instead she pushes him aside and goes back into her hotel room. And they part ways for a little bit. I think she goes to California, and Bond decides he has to go to the Saratoga horse racetrack, and bet on a horse. And obviously that happens. And then so Bond, bets on the horse and stuff like that, and him and Felix watch it, and then also Felix has to go to has to tell Bond to go to this mud bath place, which is James was like, really? I have to go to that place? All right, Felix. So, and also the Spangled Mop, Shady Tree tells Bond to go over there. So Bond, hides his money in his jacket, and goes into the mud bath and stuff, and he's relaxing. And then all of a sudden, the horse jockey gets really pissed off with some people, and then some of the main villains in this book, Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd, they're disturbing. They're really disturbing in this book. They're brutal, masked killers they're supposedly gay. Yeah, they're gay, and then they beat up this poor horse jockey. They beat the shit out of him, and decided, for final touches, they put him in a sulfur shower and mess up the guy's face. I'm like, oh my god, that is so fucked up. I'm like reading this and also listening to the BBC4 adaptation of it. I'm like, oh my god, this is a fucked up book. But I'm enjoying it. I'm reading through the sucker. And then after that happens, Bond contacts Shady. They get some money and stuff like that, because some stuff happened. And Shady's like, okay, don't worry, Mr. Franks. I'm gonna help you out here. We're buds. So, and then Bond goes to Vegas, meets up with Tiffany Case and stuff like that. And then Bond starts gambling and stuff and making some money and, smuggling the diamonds. And then Bond, this is a short review. This is not going to be a full detailed review. If you want one of those, go watch Calvin Dyson. A shout out to him all the time in my videos, these Bond books. Bond gets kidnapped by Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd after a really cool car chase. And then take him to Spectreville, which is this abandoned cowboy western town run by one of the Spangled mobs, the Spangled brothers. And he has a train called the Cannonball, which is completely bonkers. And the diamonds are already getting smuggled back into London, for to the other Spangled brother. Bond gets the shit kicked out of him and stuff, and Tiffany, is just forced there to watch it and stuff. And then Tiffany and Bond get out of there after a little shootout. They go into this push mine cart, and then the villain in this chapter. Gotta go to the Spectreville chapter of the novel. Page 62. Mr. Spang. Okay. Surfmo Spang. He's named after an ice cream. Okay. chases him with the cannonball, with the train. And so Bond and Tiffany Case relocate the train tracks, so the train can go into this ditch somewhere. And Bond shoots the train to death and shoots Sarah Frémaux, dies, and the train explodes. And then they're out in the desert, and then Felix finds Tiffany Case, and he picks her up and also picks up James. James is really injured. He got beat up by Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd real bad. So and then they got beat up bad, and so he flew them to New York, and then they have to go into the Queen Elizabeth, a boat trip back to London. And Tiffany and Bond, they fall in love. They love each other. And then later in that part of the book, Tiffany gets kidnapped by Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd, and Bond finds out about that, and then decides, crashes in the window and tells Tiffany to get into the bathroom and don't get out until I say so. And Bond shoots both Wint and Kidd, makes it look like a double suicide. Double suicide. Brutal. But in the book, they're more brutal than in the movie. We'll talk about that later. So after that happens, they go to London. Tiffany goes to James's flat, who we find out that Bond has a housemaid down there named May, and she's Scottish, so that's kind of cool. So after that happens, Bond decides to go after the other Spangled brother. I can't remember his name on top of my head, and they also meet up with the diamond smuggler, the dentist from South Africa that helps smuggles the diamonds, and he doesn't want to be part of this nonsense anymore because he wasn't getting paid. He's not getting paid enough for all the trouble he's going to get into. So Bond and the British police, they shoot that guy up, and then the other Spangled guy flies up into his helicopter, and then Bond is on a boat with another British police officer. They start shooting the helicopter, and Bond's like, I want to try to get him alive, but instead they have to shoot automatically. Shoots down the helicopter, and bam! Crashes and burns, and all the diamonds are there, but they're engulfed in flames and all messed up. And the value for them went... what's the other Spangle's name? Rufus Spang. He's also known as ABC, so he's also ABC. And so, Bond kills him, and then they can't, go through the wreckage because it's in the water and it's dark out. They have to wait until later in the morning. So Bond tells those guys to sleep it off into that truck, into the truck, and then Bond walks off. Bond dropped down off the truck and started walking slowly towards the leaping fire. He smiled grimly to himself. All this business about death and diamonds was too solemn for Bond. It was just the end of another adventure for which the phrase Tiffany Case might be the epitaph he could see passionate. In Colonel Mouth saying the words, it reads better than it lives. And also his final words are, death is forever, but so are diamonds. And that's the book. It's a great book. It's a very fun read. I really enjoyed reading Diamonds Are Forever. I had a lot better time reading it than back in 2011, 2012 when I initially read it. And I really like this book. It's just a really gripping read. I love gangster stuff nowadays. I love watching mob films like The Godfather, and Italian mafia films because I'm half Italian. I love watching The Godfather series. I love watching Goodfellas, all those films, and also Once Upon a Time in America and stuff like that. I'm a huge fan, also The Sopranos as well. So I love reading this book. It's a fun read. And Fleming writing about Americans and stuff is a little jarring, but I still really enjoyed this book, and it was just a fun read. So now for the adaptation. After 5 films with Sean Connery initially quits the role of James Bond, and George Lazenby comes in for Honor Majesty's Secret Service. And that film did so-so. It did okay. It did make some money, but it wasn't a huge hit. Initially, the film was going to be a dark revenge story that's going to follow up Diamonds, follow up on Her Majesty's, because they filmed the books out of order. They started with Doctor No, which was book 6, and also with on Her Majesty's Secret Service. It was supposed to be followed up with You Only Live Twice, but they filmed You Only Live Twice before on Her Majesty's, so they decided, Diamonds will be the next film. But initially, they probably wanted to do Man with the Golden Gun and all that stuff, but they never did. So they picked Diamonds Are Forever. They dropped the whole dark revenge plot and stuff like that, and they initially wanted to do another Goldfinger, to make it successful. So they brought back Guy Hamilton, Shirley Bassey, the stuff that made Goldfinger work. And they were going to bring back Gert Frobe to play Goldfinger's twin brother, which they threw that idea around a lot. Because originally Goldfinger was supposed to be followed up with Her Majesty's Secret Service, and Blofeld was going to be Goldfinger's twin brother. That got dropped. And then so they were going to bring Goldfinger's twin brother idea back. That, again, did not work. And so they brought back, Blofeld and using a whole Howard Hughes thing. The film, this started the trend with Bond films, again, because, from Russia with Love and Doctor No, they followed the books very well, especially from Russia with Love. Even though they changed some stuff in Doctor No, but it still followed the book pretty decently well. Goldfinger followed the book pretty well as well, but they did change a lot of stuff. Thunderball followed the book, but they probably changed some stuff around. I know they changed one thing. You Only Live Twice did not follow the book whatsoever, and then On Her Majesty's, they followed the book on key, but they weren't going to do that again, so they decided to not follow the book. They only took things out of this book and put it into movie. The Spangled Mob is nowhere to be seen in this movie. They were glimpsed in at Goldfinger, but they were not the Spangled Mob. They were just different, mob areas, like the West Coast, East Coast, blah, 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 blah. Chicago, New York, Seattle. Instead, Spectre, Blofeld were the villains in this movie, even though they were not even a thing until later in the series, in the book series. So the Spangled Mob doesn't exist. The only characters that they put in from the book into the movie, the dentist guy, he's pretty similar to the book counterpart. Mr. Went and Mr. Kidd, and then Tiffany Case, and Shady Tree. That's pretty much it. The only other thing they took was the title, the diamond smuggling thing, and also Peter Franks, and the Las Vegas setting. That is pretty much it. And Felix Leiter. So, the film is fun, but out of all Sean Connery's official films, this is his weakest film. He looked like he aged since he did You Only Live Twice, which was kind of an issue. He was very tired, didn't want to give a shit, and also he was doing it for a huge paycheck and a 2-picture deal with United Artists. Sinuses. But it followed some keys pretty well. I mean, like the diamond smuggling stuff, Tiffany Case and stuff. Even though they did change Tiffany Case's look, because in the book she's blonde. In this one she's a brunette because she's played by Jill St. John. She is right there. Jill St. John. And they really wanted to heavily shoot this in Vegas because of the Rat Pack thing was huge. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin. What's that guy's name? I forgot his name. Come to me. He has a deleted scene in this movie, if I forget. Sorry. Sammy Davis Jr. So, they wanted to film it in Vegas and to make it, because initially they wanted to make Bond more American, but that never happened, thank God. It stuck British. Because Bond being American, that would never fucking work. They tried, Casino Royale back in the 50s, and like I said, that was a failure. So, the film was a decent adaptation of the book, but, it didn't follow the source material that well. Overall, I mean, the comparisons with this, they only took the things out of this that they took. They took the title, the Las Vegas setting, Tiffany Case, Peter Franks, Mr. Wint, Mr. Kidd, even though they were really different in the movie. In the movie, they were a little bit sillier. You know, they're played by Putter Smith and Bruce Glover. AKA the father of Crispin Glover. They're strange people. And the dentist character and Shady Tree, that's pretty much it. But overall, the movie was just campy, silly. What would become the Roger Moore era? If Roger Moore started in this film, that would have been funnier. But we got a good old Sean Connery back in one more film, and it did save the film series because initially the series was gonna suffer, so they saved it. But it's it's not as good as the other ones. It's not as good as Goldfinger from Russia with Love, Honor Match. These or You Only Live Twice nowhere near as good as those. But I still enjoy it for what it is. It's just a fun little silly movie. But I would definitely prefer the book over the film. Definitely by a long shot. I mean, like with Casino Royale, I prefer the book a little bit more than the film, but the film is still really good. Live and Let Die, I like both. I would probably prefer the film over the book because I grew up with the film, but I like both. And Moonraker, I actually prefer the novel a little bit more than the movie, but because they're both different. This, I prefer the book over this for by a long shot. I love this film. Don't get me wrong. I like this film. I grew up with this one. Even though back when I got into Bond, I watched Roger Moore and Pierce the most. Those were my two main Bonds. I wasn't a huge fan of Timothy Dalton back then. Nowadays, he's my favorite James Bond. Back then, he was not. I was not into him that much. I liked his films, but I wasn't into him. Lazenby, I did not like, and I still don't like. Even though I like his film, I just don't like him. He's my least favorite James Bond. And I like Sean Connery, but I don't think he's the perfect James Bond. I never really saw him as the perfect James Bond. He's the first guy that played James Bond. Yes, I'll say that, but he's not my favorite James Bond. I like him, but by the later part of the series, when the films that he was in, kind of like slept. And this is the case of the slipness. But overall, I enjoyed this. This is a very fun read and a fun watch, So yeah, that's Diamonds Are Forever. I give the book, since it's not as good as the first three, because I think the first three are a little bit better. I still enjoy it. I give it a 7 out of 10, and I give the film like a mediocre, like mixed review. It's fun, but it's not my favorite. The next review will be From Russia with Love. That'll take a little while because I'm still reading it. I'm filming these on the same day. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe. I'll be back. Peace.